Good evening, everybody. It's shortly after 6:30, so I guess we can get things started. My name is Eleanor Ingersoll. I'm president of the Queen Village Neighbors Association. I want to welcome you all for coming here tonight for our October community meeting. Just so you know that these mics are not for amplification for you. They're actually to be able to send sound directly to the cameras, because since we have endeavored to do in-person meetings, we want to give the opportunity for people who couldn't be here to be able to see it online. And we thank Manny and his crew who will tape this, edit it, and make sure we get it up on your YouTube channel very, very shortly. So tonight, before we get to our main program, we do have some QVNA business to take care of. Our elections are going to be in November, and the opportunity to declare for a seat on the board for that election ends tomorrow. So I'm going to introduce Phil Halshauer, who's also he's chair of the nominations committee, as well as treasurer for QVNA, and I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about that.
Thanks for the one lowly clap in the back. I appreciate that. Makes me feel really good. Thank you. So as Eleanor said, I'm Phil Halshauer, newly minted treasurer and chair of the nominating committee of QVNA. So really, it's my job to find people that want to run for the board, and I do have a couple faces here that I'll introduce to you in a second. But just a little background, QVNA does hold a public election. This will happen at the QVNA offices from November 4th through the 10th. So you can come out as long as you're a resident of Queen Village, and I believe over 18 years of age, you can submit a form and cast your ballot for some of these people that you'll be meeting in a little bit. This year we have 2 officer positions and 5 board member positions. So that's 7 people in total for 2-year terms on the board. So enough about me and talking. I'll introduce a couple of them just so you can put a name to a face. So when you're seeing this paper, later on, you can say, okay, I heard from that person. So I'll start with the first person is Kate Allen.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Allen, and I would like to run for president of QVNA. I've been on the board for the last 2 years, first as a director, then as treasurer, and now I'm currently vice president. So some highlights. Most recently, Eleanor and I joined a team with our friends at South Street Head House District and Society Hill Civic Association to start looking at a master plan for South Street. Not just things like coordinating with L&I to investigate businesses who don't have all their paperwork and then shut down those who don't, but also to encourage new businesses to come to the street and fill some of those vacancies. I also volunteer with the Courtyard Mentor Network, which is an after-school mentoring program, which is a fiscally sponsored group by our organization, and it provides mentoring and career opportunities for middle school boys in our neighborhood. And Chris Mullen, who you'll be hearing from in a second, he and I coordinated the first Tour de Art, which was an art gallery bar crawl, which we had a bunch of art galleries. People got to go around and really experience our neighborhood and paid homage to the village's artistic roots. And we're very excited for the opportunity to do more things like that. I've worked closely with Eleanor over the last 2 years, and I know the tremendous amount of work that it takes to do this job and to do this job well. Not only because the stakes are so high, but as president, the stakes are oh so public. And even though, because she is termed out and she is leaving monstrously large shoes that somebody has to fill, I appreciate the opportunity to try and fill those shoes and to continue in her footsteps and to continue to do all of the hard work for our neighborhood that I love so much. Thanks so much.
Next, you're going to hear from Mr. Mike McPhilmy.
Good evening. Hoarse voice from a rough Phillies game last night, so please bear with me. Please bear with me. Hi, I've lived here in Queen Village for about 20 years with my wife, Nadine Lamakin, and I've been on the board now for 4 years. During that period of time, I was interim treasurer where we helped navigate additional revenue for Queen Village so that we could continue some of the great things that we're doing in terms of helping the community with financial needs. For example, across the street, we've basically helped Mario Lanza with tree trimming, paying for tree trimming and keeping the park in a great situation. We have helped Old Swedes with continuing to help their revenue or revitalization of that facility. Summer programs for our kids. So there's a wide variety of things that we've done, and where we can really use your help is clearly coming out to vote for us, but join Queen Village as a member of Queen Village. We need your help. We need additional funds so that we can keep doing all the great things that we've been doing, and look forward to seeing you in the neighborhood. And please cast your vote for another 2 years for me. Thank you.
That's fine. Next up is Matt.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Atkins. I'm running for my second term on the board. Previously, I was a volunteer for Queen Village's Clean Up Your Parks Day. I've also served on the Grants Committee for the past about 4 years. I represent Queen Village Neighborhood Association today at the Crosstown Coalition, which is a large gathering of the RCOs in the city. There's nothing I love more than both advocating for grants for community organizations and representing Queen Village amongst the city. So would love your vote for the next term. Thanks.
Next one up is current Secretary Chris Mullins.
Thank you. No one told me I was speaking tonight, so okay. Yes, I am the current secretary of the board. Co-chaired the Tour de Art with Kate. Was the chair of this committee before yesterday, and you know, it's not really about me. It's about the community. I'm interested in spending my time out and helping everybody to figure out ways forward, ways that we can all get along and just be good neighbors. The Hawaiians call it please kukua. It's just do the right thing. And that's what I'm all about, and please vote for me. Thank you.
Next, you'll be hearing from Christine.
Hi, neighbors. So my name is Christine Larish-Torsivia, and I moved here about 20 years ago from the recommendation of friends. And my husband and I met because we lived 2 blocks away from one another 17 years ago, and we now have a 6th grader at Meredith. I'm hoping to contribute on the board as a director because I have a background as a director in social work, and I've spent a lot of time with everything from project planning to grant writing, and I'm hoping that that would make a difference and help build our community stronger. Thank you.
Next, you'll be hearing from Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura Wilbur. I live on Queen Street. I was recruited by some neighbors to run for the board, and some of the reason for that was I've provided advocacy with this good man here and this good man here for a neighbor that for 2 years suffered an illegal demolition next to her house, seriously damaging her house, and she couldn't get anything done. I have 20 plus years, retired from the legal field when I was 49 in Houston. I represented a lot of different businesses for business development, how to increase business. And one of the things that is really hurting QVNA right now, and it was mentioned by a couple of people, is we need to get membership way up. It's minimal compared to the population, and not enough effort and time has been able to be spent on getting that done. I think the next biggest thing is crime. We have a serious crime issue in Philadelphia, and with less police, less funding, it's getting worse. I have spent some time working with neighbors around me on what can we do, simple things like turning on our street lights or our night lights outside our doors at dusk and leaving them on till dawn, developing a contact within the neighborhood to report things to. My husband and I have also personally funded trash cleanup for about 3 to 4 blocks on Queen Street and around. And I can tell you it makes a huge difference. I've talked with police officers, and they say if the blocks are clean, criminals tend to go, there are eyes on this block. Look how clean it is. There's flower boxes out. I've encouraged a bunch of neighbors to get, you'll see a lot of little cafe tables between like 3rd and 6th Street, where people have put little bistro type tables outside where they're out sitting, talking to their neighbors, or spending more time out in the neighborhood. We've purchased a house that used to be a synagogue and renovated it here, and have a serious interest in the safety and the development of Queen Village. And I'd like to thank the council member and Nikki for what they did for this widow who is whose house was badly damaged and couldn't get any response from LNI. And I'm running for president.
Thank you. So there are a couple other candidates that couldn't be here due to them being sick or some other family arrangements that they had. So I will say, look out for the materials that will be on our website so you can take a look at before you do cast your vote. They do send their regards that they couldn't be here. But again, we will be back the next community meeting. I think it's on November 16th to do the final election. So November 4th to 10th at QVNA offices, come out and vote. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Phil. And now, please, State Senator Nikil Saval and State Representative Mary Isaacson are here tonight and definitely deserve to sit down now. I appreciate. Thank you. And just to wrap that up, yes, there will be voting in the office for the dates that Phil identified, and also on our November election, our November community meeting, where we will also be taking votes. We will count it during the meeting and announce that night. So hopefully you can join us again as well. I'd like to move it ahead to our main topic for tonight, because as you saw in the announcement that I sent out to the community, that after a hugely successful South Street Festival, unfortunately it was ended in gunfire, and thankfully not a homicide, but a person unnecessarily injured. And we need to find out, yes, what can be done at every single level, because everyone is fatigued about the passing of the buck between the mayor, the police commissioner, the district attorney, and city council. While there should still continue to be focus on the city's ability to handle these extensive problems of crime and violence, people need to understand what is happening or could happen at the state and federal level to help address these problems. Morale is low. People feel paralyzed because basic law-abiding quality of life issues devolve, creating a city they don't recognize or feel safe in. So I want to keep it primarily open as it's understood that there are city problems and the state is limited to what they can do. But I think everyone would like to see how there could be collaboration and cooperation for addressing the problem, enforcing violations, whatever help there could be, and supporting prevention programs as well as their oversight. So I pass it off to you.
I can go ahead. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you to all the neighbors for attending and for all your advocacy and support, and for everyone who's running for a position. It's very much needed, that kind of advocacy and local community work, in order to bring the kinds of stability and safety and vibrancy to a neighborhood that Queen Village, very much enjoys, and despite the challenges that we are talking about tonight, in part. So again, I'm Nikil Saval. I represent the 1st Senate District, which is we're in right now. I'm also a Queen Village neighbor. I'm a neighbor of Laura's. We live on Queen between 5th and 6th. Have lived here for 10 years, and I'm raising 2 children in the neighborhood. One thing that I think both the representative and I would like to highlight is in part what has come out of the budget in July that we negotiated with the governor, which it does have some measures to address what is clearly a terrible problem in our city, and inducing the kind of trauma that collectively none of us are prepared to go through, should have to go through, and we should not be going through in the future. So we had a budget that increased overall state education funding and did it through a fair funding formula by over $1 billion. Now this is a huge achievement for it goes to special education programs, to several hundred, or it's 200 million to the city of Philadelphia, or is it?
Well, especially.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mary Isaacson. I'm your state representative for the 175th district here, and I actually am the Philadelphian on the Education Committee in Harrisburg. So we've made historic investments in the education funding, not only through the fair funding formula. We increased not just with general budgetary money, but not just ARPA money. So that is concrete money. And it went to everywhere from pre-K to higher education. And these investments, especially with a formula in addition to the fair funding formula called Level Up, which invested additional funds into the more distressed school districts, Philadelphia being one of them, especially with all the needs that we have in Philadelphia, that our schools are not only places where we need to educate our children, but it's also many areas in where children are getting their meals for the day, and that we have to make sure that there's after-school programs and funding. One of the other things we increased in this budget that was historic was library funding. That was hard fought for many years, and we made a point to make these investments, and that I commend the governor and the Senate and my chamber for holding firm to get our colleagues on the other side to go with this budget and make these investments in education, because here in Pennsylvania, once you hit a number, it's called a hold harmless provision, in which case we can't reduce the amount of funding next year. So we held out for this investment, and the governor really saw it as his top priority to make sure that we got this funding back to every school district benefited, but specifically with the Level Up funding, the more distressed school districts in the Commonwealth. And again, from pre-K on up, everybody got increases, and that includes community colleges, that includes other institutes of higher learning, so that we can maintain a good public school system here in Pennsylvania. This budget also, I'm going to switch to another topic because this was my favorite. This is the first year I ever voted for a budget from the governor, because he never invested additional funding into the environment. Some of our colleagues from around the state don't like to necessarily do anything but give tax credits to energy companies. And we were able to hold out and get significant investments into that, which the environment also means DCNR and DEP, which is not only clean water and air for everybody, but the parks and rec centers. And these are also institutions that we need to have in communities so that there are things for our young people to enjoy, not just us, but for all ages. And so I was happy to put that up. But if you want to,
Please. Yeah.
Look, we all want to make sure that we fund Philadelphia as much as we can. We fight out in Harrisburg every day to try and get everything to allow the city to govern itself with the Home Rule Charter, because that is constantly under attack, as we've seen with gun laws. That's one that everyone's willing to go to the courts to make sure that we can enact laws. But I am happy to see that we're trying again and I spoke with President Clark the other day about this, try to go back to court to see if we can get under the Supreme Court in today's environment an understanding that what's happening in some of our urban areas, we might need additional help that is not necessarily something that's very favorable elsewhere, but that we truly do need to be able to have some governance around here. With regard to where you started off, Eleanor, we are here as your representatives, and we are a part of your communities. I live right up the river in Northern Liberties, and the senator, I'm sure, will attest to his office as well as my office work constantly with regard to some of the issues that plague all of our communities, whether it's the nuisance businesses, and certainly my office and Senator's office serves on many task forces that operate throughout our district. Down here, it's the South Street Head House Task Force, but we also have them in Old City and Center City and around, and we participate in them, try and bring the resources of the state to the communities, including like liquor enforcement with regard to establishments that have liquor licenses when they are having nuisance behavior stemming from their establishment. We try and come in and help the local police in L&I, and certainly the councilman's office, try and get as many city services to affect the quality of life around here in a positive light when there are some that might be causing problems and bringing people to your neighborhood that are an issue.
And I appreciate that, and I put this question to both of you, but I'll ask you to answer first, Senator Saval, is that what programs, there are many important initiatives, endeavors, work going on, at the Capitol, but where we are now and what we're living through specifically in Philadelphia, what legislation, what works are you working on, or what could come down the pike to address some of these problems? Because even in our nightlife task force meetings and in concerned community member meetings, we've got all the policies and agencies in the world, but the enforcement is the huge issue. And does that enforcement, how does that work? Is it addressing the preemption law, which doesn't allow us to set our own gun control issues? Is it more money going to liquor control, so they have the agents to come in and find these businesses when they're operating, which is usually 9 to 5 hours? I mean, what are the caveats in Harrisburg that can help ease what we're living through now? And you as well, being residents of the city.
Absolutely. It's a very good question. I mean, so, the things that have happened that will have near-term effects are we were able to increase the amount of one. I will just say that community-based violence intervention is effective and it works, and there has been a tremendous increase. There was a first tranche of money that went through in the budget last year, and now there's an increase of money to community-based violence intervention programs. The first rounding of funding applications just went through for those. So we have for example, as the councilman can attest to, we have been dealing with increased violence further in South Philly on 7th Street. We've had obviously what's going on the incidents on South Street. We've had a number of different applications from groups that are doing work across South Philadelphia, and to expand and improve the kind of programming that they're able to do, especially with young people, especially with groups that are most vulnerable and most likely to resort to gun violence, as we've seen in these incidents, in order to mitigate that. So that will actually, those applications again are these are groups that are doing incredible work. They're creative, they're rooted in the community, they have contacts among community members. That is the kind of largest investment that the state has made in prevention. In addition, though it may not seem on the face of it as a kind of violence intervention program, we increased the amount of affordable housing support at the state level from $55 million to $430 million, which is again one of the largest increases in sort of Pennsylvania history, one might say, including, and I'm very proud of this, the creation of a new program which I spearheaded, which is called the Whole Home Repairs Program, which would invest $125 million in home repairs, workforce development, so job training for the home repair industry so that people can stay safe in homes that they can afford. And one thing that you learn from that violence intervention studies have shown is that the repair of a single home on a block can reduce incidents of violence on that block by 22%. And that's just a single home. So if you actually have massive investments across the state and of course across the city in maintaining neighborhoods, which speaks to the kind of quality of life issues that we were talking about earlier, can we have blocks that are stable where people are able to stay in their homes rather than lose them due to unremediated lead, leaky roofs, things like that. I mean, these have long-term effects on the stability of our city and ensuring that people stay and don't leave, and then eventually pass on intergenerational wealth to future family members. So those are the things that have been achieved. I agree that that preemption is a major issue. I mean, it remains one of the kind of, I think the strongest causes that that the representative and I and members of our caucus pursue is the inability to maintain gun laws of our own in the city of Philadelphia, or to face preemption as we did with the mayor, for example, having his guns in parks kind of initiative thrown
And
out.
just to update everybody, it is the city of Philadelphia can't set its own gun laws. They will be controlled only by the state, and therefore the assembly.
Well, I agree with everything the senator said, and we have through what's called DCED, the Department of Community Economic Development, crime and delinquency grants, excuse me, and we certainly have funded those again in this budget in historic levels, understanding that we need to get these monies blowing out to communities so that there's the resources available, and that we're supportive of the city initiatives, and so that we can do our best to be the support system and hopefully a financial benefit to getting the city the resources it needs. Unfortunately, again, we have a home rule charter, and we are very careful not to come in as a state. You really, in all honesty, you do not want our colleagues from the rest of the state coming in and having a say over how we govern ourselves.
Can you just give a little overview of the homeroom charter in case we're referring to things that aren't?
Philadelphia is the only county that has a home rule charter. It was part of the Sterling Act years ago when they did the consolidation, and we are allowed to, as you know, tax additionally, but part of that was also to govern ourselves. So we just kind of receive funds from the state, but city council and the mayor are the ones that really create the laws that on a daily basis govern it. And fund things like a police department, a fire department. There's a lot of places in Pennsylvania, their police department is the state troopers. They don't have, they have volunteer fire departments. They don't have all the public safety measures that this large urban area has. So we were given the ability to create and govern ourselves that way. And we are very careful to protect it out in Harrisburg because, again, if you even open that door, it's like the old vacuum salesman. They'll stick their foot in the door and you'll never get it closed again. So we do our best to try and get as much funding as we can. Unfortunately, as the Senator and Eleanor spoke about, there's a preemption law with regard to guns. And we are not allowed right now. The Supreme Court rules time and time again about the fact that there has to be what they call a uniformity with regard to guns in Pennsylvania. So that's the uphill challenge. If the Supreme Court ruling comes down and creates new precedents, which is what I was referring to earlier with regard to the resolution being challenged already with the preemption law, perhaps we will be able to create some laws here in Philadelphia that would be tailored to making our streets safer and give a little more teeth to our local law enforcement to deal with the gun crisis that we have here in Pennsylvania.
If you had anything to add, I did want to, I wanted, being a community meeting, I want to give you all the opportunity to take the mic, ask our state rep and our state senator any questions you might have regarding these or any other issue. And if you could tell me your name and cross streets.
All right, I'm Vicki Giba. I live at Fitzwater and 6th. I wasn't planning to ask you a question. I didn't think I had any questions for the state, but one of the things that I find frustrating is when you mentioned a lot of the programs that are currently going on and that are supposedly successful, but if I hadn't come here tonight, I don't know how to hear about any of that. Nothing is published. There's no newsletter. There's no information that comes out that lets me know what are the names of the programs. Why do you think they're successful? Are they, what data is being collected? So I find that if you want people to become involved and not have a morale problem, something needs to be done to disseminate more information. It's like we have the worst PR about this that I could imagine. So I'm not clear on why that happens. It's kind of the same thing that I'm going to ask about the city, but so and you mentioned programs too, and the money that you've given, and no one knows anything about it.
So is your question dealing more with
My question's my staff.
accessibility of this, and how does it translate
Yes.
to the population at large?
Well said. Yes. How can we get more information more regularly and have things be more transparent, not only at the state, and I guess right now I'm specifically talking about the gun violence situation.
Sure.
If things are working and you're giving out money, we want to know what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can start, and then and I do have to apologize that I have to go not too long from now because we're I'm giving out, we're supporting an after school program with a grant deeper in South Philly, but if that's the case, I think that the state, I think you're right to some degree, does a poor job of trumpeting some of its successes, and perhaps I think occasions like this, newsletters that we get out to the public. I know that the representative sends one out, I believe, weekly. We want. There's no question that we want to reach people more, and I think the answer is simply we have to do a bit more in terms of ensuring that our, in particular, some of our printed materials. Obviously, QVNA does an excellent job of ensuring that its printed materials get to all our neighbors. So making sure that some of this is perhaps made available or made clear what's happening at the state level in every kind of possible media venue. We are challenged. We have like a limited. I am a former journalist. I feel like our media situation is not what it once was, and so I do feel like that is a major contributor to the lack of information. But I think we could be spreading more good news. I agree about what's going on at the state level. I personally, people may have bad feelings about Harrisburg. I think there's a lot you can do. We can certainly do more with certain conditions being better, but I think there's a lot that we've been able to accomplish. And we should be spreading that the word. This is sort of an injunction I hear in what you're saying to find more ways to communicate with more people. So I agree. You should want to know about that, and in particular how these programs are performing. I think that's actually a very good criterion. One can say that one's brought money home, but then how did it work? Who did it go to? I think it would be great to kind of come back maybe to this group in some ways and say, well, this is where these grants went and this is what's happening, and we can sort of have have an honest conversation about the evaluation of them. And
that come through the neighborhood association newsletters.
All right. Well, I appreciate that feedback. I do have a weekly email I send out every Friday, so if you come to my website and sign up for it, and again, we do newsletters, but our offices are available, and with this feedback, perhaps QVNA can send out our office contact information in a blast so that it's a little more fresh. And I know myself, I come out and I do a shredder event every spring and fall here, and we have a table with information that we provide from my office with regard to state stuff. So November 19th, okay, come out and we could talk more about it.
I'll bring the mic to you. I'm sorry? It's for the recording. Yes. So thank you. Name across your finger.
Excuse me. Okay. I'm Susan Bird Collins, and I actually live in Society Hill. And for right now, I'm president of Society Hill Civic, and it's nice to see you again. It's nice to meet you. With regard to the Nightlife Task Force, I've got two questions. One, Nightlife Task Force. It's nice that you have it going, and I've gone to many of the meetings. We need more action from the state, serious money to go to the state for enforcement. We've got bars, his and hers being one of the worst. We've got Mirage Lounge. We've got people who are going in with guns. Their guns are, and in fact, I think Samantha was on a call when they said we take the guns when they come in and we give them to them when they go back out on the street. That's not a good idea. And certainly the gun laws are what the gun laws are, but not your office, but if you could please get more money to enforcement for L&I, because if they come down and if state people come down, those big black cars, people pay attention to that, and that will disrupt what is happening on South Street, and that needs to happen, and it needs to not happen next summer. It needs to start now. Councilman Squilla is here doing everything he can, getting 10 million emails from everybody complaining, and he is doing everything with L&I. We need the state. Secondly, as to the gun laws, it's a real problem that with preemption, and that was Senator Fumo, thank you, that got rid of the city gun laws. However, when we had gun laws in the city, we had a lower murder rate than we have now. After we got rid of our gun laws, our local gun laws, our murder rate still went down. It went down to 265 murders. So we have a bigger problem. It is not just the gun laws, it is an enforcement issue, and we know where that comes from. But whatever you folks can do, and to really get behind and muscle the issue of prosecutorial policies, we need the help, because we're going to lose neighborhoods. So, thank you.
And rightfully so. I'm sure when you meant money for enforcement, it was for liquor, because you can control the state and the liquor control enforcement agents. But I will pass that off to you.
All right. One of the other committees I sit on in Harrisburg, I'm on the liquor committee. I specifically requested that because having worked for my predecessor, I understood over the years the different issues that come along with regard to liquor licenses and establishments and nuisance bars. And excuse me. The LCE, which is Liquor Control Enforcement, is the enforcement side of the LCB, which is the Liquor Control Bureau. And the LCE is funded fully by LCB and the state stores. So all the alcohol that's sold goes right into the coffers, and it's a self-sustaining entity. Now, we have requested, and we will continue to try and get more and more enforcement out here. Just understand that it's a large county, and there's only so many enforcement agents they have, and this is a big city, and from stop and goes and other liquor issues, that there has to be, as I'm sure many of you remember, a paper trail. So there, and Eleanor has spearheaded beautifully on your website reporting. So as we are able to put that together with the enforcement and they're able to make a case, it then gives them the ability to go in what we call a raid or a check, etc. The unfortunate side of this with regard to that does become that a lot of these bar owners, especially the nuisance ones, like to go to court, and they're allowed to stay open while they're litigating out their violations. And that's a cost of doing business to them. Go ahead.
To ask, is it a budgetary problem, or is it a personnel problem that there aren't the agents necessary to cover everything you mentioned, from nuisance bars to problem bars to stop and goes, whatever the case may be? I think everyone, there's confusion on, is the budget big enough to hire more people, or are there not people to hire?
We could attempt to increase the budget, but then you have to actually have people applying. And there has been a decrease, not only on the state level, on the city level, but on the state level, of people applying to become law enforcement agents. So that's why we work on these task forces, so that it can be a all hands on deck attempted coordination, because you might be able to, it might be easier to shut down a nuisance bar through, say, a health code or a fire violation than necessarily going through the court system under the liquor license. But it doesn't mean that there can't be a coordinated effort to try and make sure that all the agencies are working together, and that's certainly what we try and do on these task forces with the councilman's office. And as with everything, and we could certainly use more assistance from the administration on this. Which one? Yes. But that's I'll leave that statement at that.
I'm sorry you have to leave us. I would invite you to, is any one last question for Senator Saval? 1 second.
I have a I'm Jessica. I live in Society Hill. My husband's actually on the board of the Civic Association as well. So I have a statement and a question. The statement is, my kid goes to Philly Public Schools. And while I appreciate your fair funding fight, the lack of action from anybody on the state level to reopen those schools was devastating. These kids are devastated. The majority of them cannot read or write. For 2 years, it has been abundantly clear that none of the kids in my daughter's school none of the teachers in my daughter's school wanted to be there to teach her. And you can throw all the money in the world at that problem, but these kids still can't read and write. And there needs to be a different solution. My second question is this: gun laws haven't changed appreciably. It's not like we had gun control, now we don't. When I email my councilman and I talk to him about gun violence, he says it's Harrisburg's problem, because we can't make our own gun laws here. Heard that. Harrisburg says it's at the federal level. 5 years ago, our gun violence was 75% less than it is now. So what has changed in the past 5 years? And why can't we go back to the way it was 5 years ago, when there were less people dying from gun violence than there is now? I did not vote for Krasner.
Okay, well, you said the last 5 years you got crazy.
Well, when is somebody going to hold Krasner to account and say what you're doing now? Not working.
Can I just say something? Because my job as a city council person is not to blame the state or federal government for what they can do. I can only do what the city could do. And I would never deflect onto somebody else the problem that we on the city have. So if you want to share with me those emails that I sent you that said it's the state problem, we can't change the gun laws if that's the question. The state could change them, but that's not the problem of fixing this issue of gun violence. So what we could do as a city, we can't blame, as a city council person, I can't blame the DA, I can't blame the mayor. We have to make those changes in effect to make it happen. So I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
And Senator, I'll let you answer that.
Again, I apologize for having to leave early. We have an after-school program that we're supporting this evening. But the so on two separate fronts. I mean, the kind of losses that that parents and that schools and communities have had to go through over the last 2 years are awful. I mean, I just think it's awful what people have had to deal with. I have young kids who are not in elementary school, but nonetheless, as a parent, certainly understand and sympathize very deeply with what other parents had to go through, as well as what their children have had to go through and continue to go through. Personally, I believe that we as a country did a very poor, incredible, and it's hard to overstate this, a poor job of reducing the transmission levels during the pandemic. And so other countries that were able to open schools earlier, well, so I believe that we had a very high level of transmission in the United States, and that was the reason, right? That was the judgment. The thing, I mean, we have a disagreement on this. I understand that, but the judgment was that this would be the measure of protection that would guarantee the lowest level of transmission society-wide. Second, I would just say that there is a higher level of prosecution of gun crimes at the very moment. There are several hundred more prosecutions going on. The sentencing is higher than it's ever been. The issue is we are actually having a rising level of gun violence across the country and in certain counties across the state at levels that are in fact higher than those in Philadelphia. And so you can't, when you control for who is the prosecutor, when you control for what kind of policies are being pursued, it doesn't lead to the answer that the prosecutorial discretion is what's leading to the changes in gun violence. It's just simply not the case. And I do believe, and I agree with the councilman, that and would very much speak to the fact that issues that come to the councilman then come to us, and we work together quite frequently. And there's never, we, for example, are doing some work in 7th Street. We're doing work together on a number of different neighborhood concerns. It's rarely this is a Harrisburg problem, this is a city problem. We just tend to work together as much as we can on neighborhood issues because we want to see what possible resources can be devoted to any given issue at a particular time. So the resort to gun violence and the resort to guns to settle disputes at a level that is occurring in this city is awful. We should have less access to guns to be able to settle those disputes. I believe that that's fundamentally the issue.
So is that throwing your hands up and saying, since we can't do anything about it in the city, we just gotta live with it? Because that doesn't seem like a good solution.
That's absolutely not what I'm saying. So what what I have been saying is that we have been directing resources to violence intervention. It's not just because it's overwhelmingly the predominance of guns is the fueling the issue, but the lack of norms of community stability, of stable housing of, in fact, state of community schools in certain areas is a major driver of the problem as well. And so we're attacking those solutions through investments. But I believe that the predominance of guns and illegal guns and the like in our society is a major fuel of the gun violence crisis, as well as, of course, poverty. So
now I know you have to get going, and I don't want to put this last thing on you because what I am hearing from people, and you brought it up at the beginning, Senator Saval, about accountability and data from the money that's going to these crime prevention groups. I don't know if any of us knows how to get access to those, one. Two, it is tough to see on Instagram that someone that was awarded this money took 500 people to an amusement park for a gun-free, violence-free day. Those are the kind of things that you start to wonder, who cares how much money you're bringing or you say you're bringing, because we're not seeing it actively produce the results that it's intended to. And that is, I think, some of the frustration that you're hearing. Absolutely. Is that there is this disconnect between what we're hearing is happening and what's being endeavored and efforted and money that's coming, and then the actual results leading to some good. Because while there are neighborhoods experiencing housing instability and higher rates of violence and poor schools, and a lot of attention should be placed there, there is everyone else wondering, well, what can how can I feel safe? I'm not going to a crumbling school and my house is standing, but I hear gunshots like every other night, and festivals are marred by gunshots, and ATVs running out of control, and it is undeniable that there's not a connection. So again, I don't mean to put it to you as you need to set sail, but these are more of the tangibles that I think everybody's looking for.
Of course.
So,
yeah. Well, I think it merits, return conversation to exactly these are the investments made by the state. What are the results? I think that's a completely reasonable question, and something that I would be glad to revisit with my neighbors, right? And
excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you again. I apologize.
And we will invite you back to follow up with that conversation. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Well. Wait, oh yes. And I do want to say we are waiting. Congressman Evans was supposed to join us. He was asked to accompany President Biden on his visit. His chief of staff, Anuj Gupta, is set to join us. But I'm getting texts that 95 has been shut down for the president. So he is efforting to get here. So before we let you off the hook, we'll take some more questions for Representative Isaacson, and then luckily we do have Congressman Squilla here.
Councilman.
I should be. Councilman, I apologize.
Well, before I go and hand this over to the councilman, I did want to just make a comment about the question that was asked. We're living in a time where no one alive ever dealt with a pandemic. I have 2 children. When the pandemic came, my 2 high schoolers got sent home and never went back to school. My daughter never went back to school, never graduated, had a graduation, prom, or anything else. My son spent his senior year hybrid. And, we recognize that all of the students, whether it was children going into kindergarten and didn't learn to read and write because they didn't have that social interaction and that you get when you have a relationship with your teacher, and all the children learn, to the teenagers that are running around who had to deal with being closed off in their formative social years. So we do recognize that we've all been through something collectively as a society. I had to, when the pandemic hit and most of my colleagues' children got sent home, all of a sudden they called us into Harrisburg every week after week in the middle of a pandemic, because they had to kind of escape their homes. But also part of that was learning how to educate our children and keep our medical systems alive and surviving. Having Jefferson and Pennsylvania Hospital and Episcopal Hospital from Temple in my district, I was keenly aware that I had to sit and say to my restaurants and theaters, you must close down and shut down because we need to keep medical systems alive for society until we can figure this out. We can't forget what we went through. We know that we can learn from what we had to live through and how it's affected our society, and we all need to collectively figure out how to bring all of these children, whether they are the youngest or the ones that are now in college, to a place of what they've been through and the shock and, quite frankly, I don't know if you want to call it PTSD, but it's, it was a trauma. It was a trauma to everybody. We've gotten our restaurants and theaters back open and people are recovering. I spent Saturday afternoon with Councilman Squilla and Mike Harris at the wonderful festival along South Street. It was the first time that we had such a large crowd, and it was beautiful. From the pie eating contest to the karaoke on the street, to people watching the Phillies together. We are trying to find a way to recover, and we will try and do that with our children also. And we are going to have to understand and accept, which no one ever wants to do such things, that we have to find a way to have them deal with the trauma they had that we didn't necessarily have growing up, because none of us grew up in the middle of a pandemic and all the fear and shutdowns and everything else that everybody had to witness. And one of the things that happened during this pandemic, to go back to the second half of the question, was record sales of guns. Record sales of guns, and there are guns everywhere. Now, I personally have never touched a gun in my life and hope never to. I didn't understand the psychology of we're in a pandemic, it's a germ, and you need a gun. But that was kind of where some people went. And now, again, as with education, we all as a society have to figure out how to deal with the aftermath of that. And that's what we're here talking about, and that's where we're happy to come back and talk about. And I'm happy to continue working with my councilman to do the best we can to serve you all, knowing that we're not perfect, we're human, and we're trying to figure it all out and be your leaders along with our federal counterparts and deal with the things that our society is now. So.
Thank you very much for that, Mary. I did want to, does anyone have any last questions for Representative Isaacson? We're going to finish up with the representative. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that anyone who didn't get a chance to ask a question about any policies, monies, etc. Okay, just want to be sure. Did I see him? No.
Well, thank you for having me here, and I hope we can continue the conversation. And I hope I know I'll be going back and thinking about what was discussed here, and we'll continue the conversation. I'll make a pitch. I do have a shredder event, an e-recycle on November 19th, Carpenter's Walk.
Oh, yes,
right?
with us.
Yes, it's with Queen Village Neighborhood Association and Councilman Squilla. So we will both be there if you want to come and talk to us then also. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. I'll be in touch. So we have Councilman Squilla joining us, and hopefully Anuj Gupta before too long. And oh, thank you. Oh, I didn't know. Thank you. Nice to see you. Okay. Okay.
Good luck.
So, and truth be told, as Kate referenced in her address to you about her the the election. We do a lot of work with Councilman Squilla as well as Representative Isaacson on the Nightlife Task Force Committee for the South Street Head Office District, along with Mike Harris, who was here. Oh wait, who just left? And Dana Feinberg. So and also Susan Burke Collins from Society Hill. So they do hear this issue. You do hear this issue quite a bit from us and what can be done. But there might be things that people in the audience might want to ask him, more direct questions, procedures, what have you. But you've heard a lot of this conversation. I'll let you open with a remark if you'd like.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be here today. Like I heard earlier, I think it's great that you're building your membership. More people that are involved in the community, the better it is. The more people that are involved in running for office, the better it is. This is challenging times right now for our city. And, we want to collaborate with everybody to get as much help as we can. But as a council person, we know what we could do, and we need to collaborate with others who are a part of the solution. Whether they have different ideologies and different ideas on how to do that, we still need to work with them, because without everybody working together, if everybody tries to work in the silo, we're not going to make the positive changes that we need for the city of Philadelphia. And you very rarely hear me talk about anybody. Mike Harris just walked back in. So. But you were mentioned. I'm sorry, Mike. You'll never hear me blame others. We might say, I can't control that person. That's a different elected office. But whether I agree with that person, I still need to work with that person, whether it's the mayor's office, whether it's the district attorney's office, whether it's the police commissioner, the Defenders Association. We need to find what the common interests are. Public safety is our #1 priority right now. Public safety is the reason why people will leave the city. It's another reason why people will not come to the city. It's a reason why businesses will close in the city. And if we don't resolve our public safety issue and concern that we have here in the city of Philadelphia, the city will gradually lose population. And when you lose population, you lose the tax base, you lose the programs that are needed and necessary to help people to become sustainable citizens in the city of Philadelphia. So I could tell you just a little bit of what we're doing on council. And I'll just start because we just went yesterday to Trenton. And we went there. People said, why are you going to Trenton? It's a small city, it's not like Philadelphia. And what intrigued us was, they have an issue with poverty in Trenton. They had an issue with crime in Trenton. They have an issue that we see a lot of similarities to. Again, we're a lot bigger, but there was a lot of similarities. And what intrigued me, they went 90 days without a homicide. So that's 3 months without a homicide. Now, somebody says, oh, there were still shootings. Yeah, there were still shootings. And they're not saying they're perfect either. But we wanted to know what they were doing differently, learn from them, listen to others, right? Nobody knows all the answers. But if we listen to the community, we listen to other people who are doing things that seem to be right, let's take what they have and let's incorporate that into what we're already doing. As you heard about prevention and diversion, I'm big advocates for diversion and prevention. We spend a lot of money on it. And one of the mentioned things that the senator said, but are we measuring the money that we spend, right? I represent Kensington. Kensington is an area that is devastated, right, with the opioid epidemic and people living on the streets. We spend millions and millions of dollars just cleaning up. But that's not doing anything because you have to keep doing it every day because you're not addressing the problem. So if we want to spend money, we have to measure how that money's being spent and how successful that is to fixing the problem, right? We have the prevention dollars, $184 million that we're spending, right? We give them to a lot of these community groups. And Eleanor said, all right, how are we measuring the results of those groups? One thing we're not doing, and we had called for an audit of the money being spent and given out because we don't know what the outcomes are. Right? We know that we're spending money and it makes us feel good that we could throw money at a situation, but the results are what matters, right? And so we don't know those results yet. Now, it's only a couple years that we've really increased the money into prevention and diversion because diversion is good for people who make a mistake. Prevention is not to make them make a mistake. A diversion is for people who made a mistake that you could divert them to other resources to give them a chance to make their lives better. But what we weren't doing, and we were concentrating on those two things, we weren't doing the third thing that's needed for public safety, which is enforcement. Enforcement is a bad word, right? Ever since the civil unrest, if you supported enforcement, you supported racial inequities, you supported being against black and brown people in the community. And I always found that to be offensive also, because when you say that to me, you're saying that they're the only people committing the crimes. They're the only people living on the streets. That's not true, right? There's a lot of people that are looking. If you look at our retail theft numbers, people throughout the city of Philadelphia, we were not prosecuting or giving violations for retail theft. What happens? It just starts to escalate. Goes up and up and up. We have stores leaving. Why? They can't deal with it. Now, we could say that that's not the issue. It's a bad economy. You could say whatever you want. The reality is public safety drives all of this. We, on city council, created a curfew, right? Especially right after the South Street incident. 10 p.m. closure. We lowered the curfew to 10 p.m. for everybody under 18, right? And we opened up what we call resource centers, where it's not only saying a curfew, you can't be there, but if you want to go somewhere, we provided a place in South Philadelphia, Dixon House, where you could go to. It's open till 2 a.m., right? So we're providing a resource place where you could go, you could do video games, you could watch TV, you could do whatever you want at that location that's manned. We also have transportation to and from, right? But it's also a place where if we enforce curfew, we could take those individuals right to their home, or we could take them to the resource center and have somebody go pick them up, right? These are things that will directly affect the young people. We talk about young people committing crimes. A lot of the crimes that we're having are done by people under 18 years old, right? They're under 18. We have another program called GVI, Gun Violence Initiative. GVI is sort of a play on, we used to have something called Focus Deterrence years ago, right? GVI is in place. They do the same things Focus Deterrence does, which was what I believe was a great program that reduced a lot of the homicides in the city of Philadelphia, right? We do the prevention, we do the outreach. We go, we call people in who are on parole and probation and tell them, we have these opportunities for you. What are the things you need? Why can we help you not commit a crime in the future, right? The young people, they go out and engage the people most likely to be involved in a crime or maybe be a victim of a crime, right? But the only thing we don't do now with GVI that was different from Focus Deterrence is there's no enforcement if they do that crime, right? What Focus Deterrence did, they came down on them heavy. You're part of our program. Now you're part of a shooting. Boom, you're going to jail, right? There has to be a stick. Carrots are good. At the end of the day, we need a stick to go along with those carrots for it to work. And these are the things we can control in the city. We're not asking the state to do anything or the feds to do anything. We want their help and support and collaboration, because when we collaborate with ATF, with the FBI, with the Attorney General's office, we do have more resources in a way to then defend the enforcement side of this process. We just opened up AMP Court. AMP Court is an alternative misdemeanor program, right? These are for quality of life issues. This is not going to affect somebody who's shooting or being shot at. But that's for people who are illegally using drugs, people who are defecating in the street, retail theft, underage drinking. Alternative misdemeanor program allows the police to make the arrest for that minor offense, and the DA can send them to AMP. AMP Court right now is only 2 days a week. It just started in August. We worked on it for about 1.5 years. It was really Councilmember Sanchez and I really trying to spearhead this through the meeting with the DA, the city solicitor, the mayor's office, managing director. And the only thing that held it up long was because we didn't have, the district attorney was against fees and fines that are associated with AMP Court. Anytime you have a court process, there are fees and fines associated with it. So we asked the Supreme Court if we could waive those for people who are unable to pay. And it's true, a lot of people are homeless. People are out on the street. They don't have any income. So it got back to us that we couldn't do it. So we decided this year, and that's the only reason why it started in August was because in July, we added money in our budget for anybody who would have fees and fines that are eligible, income eligible, that can't afford to pay the fees and fines. The city would pay that. It's a little investment of $1 million, and we don't know how much it's really going to cost. But that now allowed the DA to be on board with this to now start AMP program. It's 2 days a week, 1 day on Whitaker Avenue at Kensington, because a lot of our issues are up in the Kensington area, and 1 day at the CJC down on Filbert Street, Criminal Justice Center. Now, AMP court allows the police to make those arrests. DA sends them to AMP court, and then they either pick a program. So AMP court goes, they have all kinds of services there. They have mental health services, they have DHS, they have rehab services, medical assistance treatment services, they have community service services. These services are then given to the person committing these quality of life crimes. If they take the services, they then have to come back to court to see if they completed them. If those services are completed, if they went into rehab or went into a program and completed that, then the DA would drop the charges. If they do not complete the services, the charges are held and there's a consequence to it, right? So we felt, and Councilman Sanchez and myself felt that giving the people, helping the people make a decision to get help that they need. And if they decide they don't want that help, then there has to be a consequence at the end, because then they know that you're going to have to go to court, right? So there's another thing that Trenton did that we sort of like. They have something called Shot Spot. It's a camera that can hear shots, and then it rotates and goes to where that shot is. Real time, the police could then be able to send personnel to that location before a 911 call is even made. So it was a pretty intriguing, and their clearance rate for homicides was close to 60%. Unbelievable, right? That is great compared to what I think ours is like 28, right? Something like that, which is not good. So things like that could help us, right? Now we have to get the administration on board. I mean, with the ATVs, I introduced the law with the sound meter cameras. We're actually meeting on Monday with the PPA and the company from the UK and the Deputy Police Commissioner to pilot them in a couple areas. Now they will be able to listen to amplified sound. If it's over the level that's allowable, it will take a picture of where that sound's coming from, and it'll be able to either do face recognition or license plate recognition. If we know the person, we could send them a violation. If we know that they have a license plate, we can send them a violation. But if not, then it would, it doesn't help with people that have illegal vehicles that you can't find. No, I'm done. I talk too much. It's time for you guys.
Will that apply to all vehicles that make noise, regardless of whether it's an ATV or a legal licensed vehicle?
Yeah, because we have these boom cars too. I mean, you have these boom car parties that you don't have them that much around here, but in my district up in the northern end, they're horrible, and their sound systems are better than some nightclubs in these cars. And I mean, you go there, the bass is so high, you bounce up and down on the ground when they go by you. That's how powerful it is.
A motorcycle the other day that was like a club. It was just a club on wheels. I mean, it wasn't.
And it was probably legal. So now if that went by the camera, you take a picture of it, the violation goes to their.
So to ask specifically, and I will get more questions, but that for a long time we were trying to get those meters that had to be handheld to go and check and decibel levels and things like that. If this sounds that good, how much will it cost? When can we get it? What are the tangible expectations?
We're
for this?
hoping we're having a meeting on Monday, so I can get back to you. It's going to be free for now. What the company says is they will provide it, right? But they want a percentage of the fines, which is fine with us, because if you make the city procure it and do it and try to install it, it won't work, first of all. And so I shouldn't say that since we're being recorded, but we're meeting with them. We want at least 2 to pilot it, to try it. So we were thinking like one on South Broad, one on South Street, like look around. I'm sort of getting the pick because it's my bill and but I don't know. It's going to be up to the deputy to place these, and we'll move them around to see how they work, what we need to do. But they are in Paris has them, and New York is using them. So we asked a couple of the people there, and they seem pretty excited with it. It's not a perfect system, and again, the face recognition, like if we recognize somebody and say, oh, we know who that is, then we could still send a ticket to them even without getting the license plate. But there's a lot of these legal vehicles that ride with the dirt bikes and ATVs. If we could eliminate them, that would reduce half the number that are riding in these big packs. Yeah, so he was an ATV. Yep. And well, what happened was the girl got in a fight with somebody complaining about they were zooming by them, and a resident was upset, or a person from the business was upset, and they started fighting. The two girls started fighting. She jumped off the back of the slingshot, and they started fighting. The security guard went to break it up, and the guy on the slingshot, after it was done and everybody walked away, took 2 shots at the security guard and injured him.
We have a question for you,
Well,
Councilman.
this isn't so much a question as a request. Can you pilot my name's John Wall. I live at 3rd and Cater Street. If you put one at the corner of 4th and South, you will make a fortune. Like, that is the epicenter of this problem. Like, I don't want to hear it's being piloted in Kensington and some random location. Like, it
Right.
should be where the shootings occurred, which is the epicenter of that dirt bike and that boom car and those tripod thing. That's where they go.
Right.
And
I mean, I would
it
say
needs to be there.
South Street is a major hub and a major concern. It's not the biggest dirt bike area, right? The biggest dirt bike area is actually Aramingo Avenue by Castor, and that's where the biggest concerns are. But I agree. I think we should try it here first and get an idea of how it could work, and then tweak it. And then we have more eyes on the street too. There's more activity there on South Street. So that's my personal opinion. It's going to be decided by the deputy once we get them in. But I would like to at least pilot it. If we pilot it, I'm hoping in the summertime is worse, but we could pilot it over the winter to tweak it and find out how it works and how it doesn't work, and then be able to give you results of that.
And we have another question back here.
Hi, I'm Perry. I live in Society Hill. Is there anything that can be done to, in some way, hold parents accountable for the actions of their children? I don't know the legal restrictions around that. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would love to say yes. I mean, but I think by enforcing the curfew is a big part, because the parents have to come pick them up. And then the issue is some of these people who are committing these really don't have parents that are involved. So to try to get them to be accountable for a lot of these kids are on their own, it's going to be difficult. But I know even when there's curfew violations, they bring the parents in. I mean, not curfew, people who miss school, truancy violations, they bring the parents in. And so when they bring them to the curfew center, they cannot leave. A lot of times it's not the parent who comes. A lot of times it's the grandparent or an aunt or somebody who's managing them. So it's going to be difficult, but I mean, it's worth the conversation to see if that's possible. Eleanor's running the questions.
If I may. Hi. I've worked in social work. Oh, sorry, Christine, and I live between Third between Catherine and Fitzwater. And, doing social work and seeing the prevention activities that have gone on for years and years and years, a long time I was in it. I really personally am a macro thinker, and it's our educational and healthcare system in my mind. But I tried to make a specific question for this meeting so that I wasn't thinking too big. And with the ATVs, is there a way, since our parking authority is so efficient, our towing companies are so efficient, isn't there a way that if the ATVs are parked somewhere that they can be picked up because they're illegal?
Yes, it is the law.
I tried to think of a simple thing.
It is the law, and we had an incident Saturday night down in Delaware and Spring Garden, right? They were confiscating one of the dirt bikes there, and the ATV surrounded the cop car and threw a brick at the window. And then when they confiscated the bike, they surrounded the parking authority vehicle and got the parking authority vehicle to stop. They didn't get the bike back because then the police surrounded that. Yes. So, I mean, the problem is these people are empowered now, right? So they believe that there's no repercussions or no consequences. We have to change that narrative. So we have to change that narrative 2 ways. One is by doing it with the cameras and having them be able to issue tickets, because you have people in the pocket. That's a big thing. The other way is by the police do have a detail, and they had a detail on duty Saturday night. It's called ATV Dirt Bike Detail. And the people who were confiscating that bike were part of the detail. Now, they only had, we shouldn't say a number, but they have people that on that detail. And when they get outnumbered by some of those folks, they need to call in backup to help them. So it can be dangerous, but we need to be consistent with it. What we're not, and it could be, it could be a resource thing that it's hard to do a detail every night, right? So if we could be consistent with that type of activity, doing it every weekend and then I'll start sending the message. You start losing your bike that you spend $5,000 for or whatever it was, that's going to hurt you. And what I asked to do, and they're agreeing to do it, we don't have a date yet, but to take all those bikes like some of these other counties do, take all those bikes and then publicly destroy them, right? So that people get to see, all right, last year it was 480 something bikes that we confiscated, but if they saw you destroying 400 and something bikes, and it's more than, it's not enough obviously, but that sends a message that to the people that we're taking this serious, we are enforcing it, and now there's going to be a consequence to that behavior. Some people are still going to do it, don't get me wrong, but we could diminish the numbers.
And that was very successful in New York as well.
Yes.
I have another question over here.
Hello, my name's Caleb. I live over on 3rd and Bainbridge. We're talking a lot about public safety, and I'm wondering what we can do to make it safer to walk or bike around the city. I remember a pretty tragic story a few months ago. A retired physician, when she was walking across, I think, 9th Street along South, and was killed by a police officer driving. So I'm just wondering what we can do to make it safer. I walk and bike mostly to get to work or businesses I go to.
Well, I mean, the city has a Vision Zero plan.
Yeah,
that we
and
follow.
I'm hoping to see more with that. It's been a little bit just a plan that's there, but I don't really see much
it's been
happening.
initiated. I mean, if you look at the number of bike lanes that are in the city of Philadelphia compared to even 5 years ago, I think it's 137 miles. We also have trails that were created on the Schuylkill and on the Delaware for both pedestrians and bicyclists and scooters and other people, alternative vehicles. So the city's mission is to really improve the walkability of it. Philadelphia is a great walkable city. So we have to make sure it's safe for the residents. Right. You could walk just about anywhere, right? And so, listen, the unfortunate incident, I don't know what happened when the police officer ran the person over. Yeah, I mean, and there's going to be some people who go through red lights. We get these emails and calls all the time. Like somebody went through a red light and almost missed somebody. Well, that's a violation. That's a crime. You should be ticketed for that, right? Now we have to do that, and we got away from a lot of those people. If you could go through a red light every time without getting a ticket, some people are going to do that, right? So again, that comes back to enforcement. And so we need to get back, and we're not saying go out there and lock everybody up, because I'm a big prevention guy and a diversion person, right? We need those things. All we're saying is if those people don't take those opportunities, then there has to be some at the end, which is enforcement. Enforcement helps with parking on corners, right? If you park on a crosswalk or a handicap ramp and you never got a ticket, but it's always a great spot for you, you're going to keep parking there.
So when somebody does that, I'm still learning the system. When somebody does that, who do you report that to?
Yeah, you could call, 911, the police are eligible to write those tickets, but if it's in a regulated zone, the parking authority will get them. They are probably the most efficient department we have. They will get them, and they'll give them a ticket if it's a regulated means.
How do you contact the parking authority to let them know about these things?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but you could call them for enforcement. I know we get a lot of emails, and we email the park. They said, tell us where it is, because they fly somebody out there to write a ticket.
It's tough to turn a corner in Queen Village these days because cars are parked in every available inch. I'll come right back to you.
They do.
Excellent.
They love.
I'm good. Oh. We're going to blast that out with the information about how to contact the state senator, state representative, Councilman Squilla, and the parking authority. Yes, can you come?
Mark, I was so pleased to hear you talking about enforcement. What can we do to get to attract more police officers? I was reading today, attractive parks and all that are wonderful. But if people don't feel safe, they're not going to those parks. So what can you do? What can QVNA do? What can we do to get more police to work? Because that's a problem. You can call them, but they don't have the force to come out.
The resources are low, right? But again, we could use excuses for not doing it. We could still do our job. We are increasing, we increased the budget for marketing. The first time we ever did that for police was this budget. So marketing and public relations for the police department. Marketing in the sense that why you should want to become a Philadelphia police officer. What are the benefits of becoming a Philadelphia police officer? It's a challenging job, and right now it's not a popular job, right? So it's not somebody says, oh, I want my son or daughter to be a police officer, right? It's scary. So we want to make it, we waived any of the requirements to become a police officer except the age, right? You still have to be 22, so you could start at 21, the application process in 22. We waived the requirements to live in the city of Philadelphia, right? So we are looking for all ways. Our problem is we do have a drop program in the city of Philadelphia, so we know when people are leaving, but our classes have been small. We're having classes back to back to back. They used to be 150. Our last class was 70, which is one of our bigger ones, right? So we're losing people faster than we're bringing them in. Plus, it takes them a little bit of time to learn the system of being on the street. So we are trying to let the public know that we are engaging into hiring more police officers. Now, what you could do as a community, and what I had a meeting with the brass, like the police commissioner, deputy commissioners, and we believe in police accountability. If a cop goes and robs somebody or does something violent or whatever it is, they need to be held accountable. But they also need to be congratulated when they do a good job and thanked for when they're out there protecting us. We are still holding them accountable, but we're not doing the second part of they lost a lot of morale. So if you don't have good morale when you're out there doing your job, you're not going to do a good job. And if a cop sees something, instead of going over to them and trying to find out what happened, he might just turn his head to go the other way. You know what? If I do something wrong, I'll lose my pension. I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to get myself in trouble. So we are working now on the morale part of the police department. How do we, as citizens, thank them for doing a good job? We just had a shooting incident in South Philadelphia, 3rd and Cantrell. It was an Airbnb. The person went there. It was somebody who rented it. They posted it on Instagram. They were from West Philly. People wanted them. Went to the house, knocked on the door, and then shot up the whole house. Right? There was like 30 shot. Nobody got hit. I don't know how. But, the police were there within minutes. They made 5 arrests. Now, I have about 8 emails that I received from neighbors saying, I want to thank the police for being down. I want to thank them for their job. I sent that to the captain. You would have thought I gave him $1 million. He goes, oh, my guys need to hear this. We need to do that. We need to be more involved in thanking people. Even the police officers were there for the festival, right? And making sure everything was safe. Even it's for somebody who was just came to your house to take a report. Let the people know. Let the captain know. And because that gets back to the officer. That'll start changing the paradigm of they should be doing their job and doing more. All they're hearing is cops don't do their job. They're lazy. They're eating donuts. They're standing on the corner. Now, that may be true in some instances. And we got to call them out when they do that. But we also have to then give them accolades when they're doing the right thing.
Before I introduce, and I'll come back to you, Caleb. Before I introduce Felicia, who's the district office for director, thank you. It was on the tip of my tongue. For Congressman Evans, I did want to ask you, Councilman Squilla, how many officers are in the sheriff's department?
I could get you that answer. I'm not sure.
Is there any way that the sheriff's department, because they are doing auctions, correct?
Sheriff sales.
And
they do evictions. There's a lot of different programs that those officers are involved with.
Could they help tie over the gap?
And also the state police is helping us right now, which they weren't in the past. They have agreed to help us. Also the police officers have agreed to do 12-hour shifts on weekends, which is something that we were happy with. And, the issue is that we can't overwork them because a tired officer is an officer who can make a mistake. And when you make a mistake, you jeopardize your job, right? So, I mean, if they make a mistake, it's a lot more serious than if me or you make a mistake. So the police department is partnering with a lot of the other agencies, but I could find out if the sheriffs, I know on special occasions, you'll see sheriff cars out there and the state police out there. When we have big events and like big games and stuff like that, they'll come and take off some of those duties so the police could patrol the areas, put sheriffs and state police in those areas. So they are now collaborating better than they were, after the unrest.
Okay, thank you. And one second, Felicia, I'm going to get one last question here. I don't think you got your name.
Oh, Caleb. My name is Caleb Benjamin. And a couple things. I agree with you. When I see public servants on the street, whether it be police or sanitation workers or postal workers, I always say thank you because I believe they're helping maintain order in our city. So I just want to add that. I always do that. I think it's very important as well to increase the morale of our public servant. But what I was going to ask you was, knowing that we know next summer when things warm up, South Street's going to go. We know now it's going to go insane. Yet we always seem to be caught off guard, like, gee, where'd all these people come from now who are driving? What can we do? Let's be preemptive. What can we do to shut South Street down, like in April of 2023, to make sure this craziness doesn't happen, number one. And number two, I heard, and this is my last question, I read, that in some places they have drones that can video or surveil the illegal vehicles and see where they're being stored, and that the ideal time to seize them would be when people aren't riding them. So what can we do about both of those two things? And then I'll stop. I don't know if that's a real program or not.
No, it is. I don't know if it's a real program, but it was brought up at our hearing in City Council. We had asked about use of drones, and the police department is now ordering drones, not only for that purpose, but for crowd control and some other things. Other municipalities have used drones in the past, but we also believe that the drones came up because of ATVs. And the reason was exactly what you said, was that, instead of chasing them and making it more dangerous and flying up and down streets and sidewalks and everything else, can the drone just follow them and then just take a picture of where they store them and then go confiscate them there? So it's not a violent interaction. You're not going after people who are running away to make it more dangerous. So their ideas, and I have to say Deputy Dales has been very good with this. And he's looking at a lot of different avenues. And when you don't have the manpower, technology is key. Like we said about shot spotter, and we talk about those things. We have to start thinking outside the box instead of just manpower, right? How can we make it better and easier for police to do their job and actually take some of their duties away from them? One thing we do with police, we send them to L&I jobs, right? We send them to homeless engagement. We send them to things where they're not really trained to do. And so a lot of times we put them in positions that aren't too good. If we remove those jobs from them, right, and have social workers do those jobs and other people do those jobs, then they could pay attention to what they're there for, is to prevent crime. And so, yes, we are looking at drones and for that type of thing. And what was your first question?
Oh, just about how can we be preemptive about what's going to happen.
Oh, on South Street. We have created a committee in the Head House District to look at South Street, re-envision South Street. How can we look at South Street so that it will be a place where not only visitors want to go to and have a good time, but people who live, the citizens who live in Queen Village and Society Hill would want to go to, right? What can we do to encourage businesses and some of the property owners there, right? Well, how can we incentivize them to make sure they put in retailers that are expected and not having 7 head shops in a row on one block, right? How can we encourage that behavior? Because at the end of the day, if you just close it down, it's still not fixing the problem, right? But if we can go, and I don't know if this is out yet, but the goal right now is to maybe start at one block and make that block sparkle. And then be able to show that block to other property owners and say, this is what your block will look like if you work with us on this, right? And it's going to take time. We met with Center City District, Paul Levy. We met with Mike Harris. We met with some local neighbors, Society Hill, Queen Village. and, looking at how we can re-envision it and make it so, because if you make it for the people who live here, the people from outside here will want to come, right? You don't have to make it for people just from outside the community to go to. And these neighborhoods could support retail on South Street because there's a lot of income in this community. So on both sides. And you took a Bella Vista and around. So if we make it so that people from the community could be here, other people, visitors would love to come also. So that's our goal. We're looking to do what is called a master plan for South Street. And hopefully we'll have something by the end of the year that we could propose.
And perfect timing, perfect wrap up to that. Felicia gets to hand the seat off. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Anuj Gupta, who is the Chief of Staff for Congressman Evans. I'm so happy you got to make it here. I know you literally, your timing was perfect.
Well, we'll tag team this. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, before you start, I just want to say thank you for all being here. But I also want to thank Eleanor Ingersoll, who's been the past president. She has run some amazing meetings in some tough times. And I want to say that even the police commissioner and some other folks were really impressed how you run a meeting with so much anger and anxiety there. It's not an easy job. And I want to give Eleanor a great round of applause. And this is a volunteer position. Nobody gets paid to get a headache. So we get paid for it. You can holler at us. I work for you. Right? Your taxes pay me.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Thank you.
Is it okay if I stand? I've literally been sitting for the last hour and a half trying to get here.
I'll let you.
Okay, thank you. So, good evening.
Oh, no, it's not verification.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anuj Gupta. I'm Chief of Staff to Congressman Evans. One of the last in-person meeting I did before March 6, 2020, when the world changed for all of us, was right here with Queen Village when I was general manager of the Reading Terminal Market. So it's fun to be back in a much different world. And I'm joined by my colleague, Felicia Parker Cox, who is our great district director. So apologize for the congressman not being here. He was slated to be here. The president decided to come into town, which is why it took me an hour and a half to get here. Felicia was very smart. She took all side roads to drive down here. We were both up in West Oak Lane.
Instinct.
That's right. I follow GPS to my demise. Let me say a few words, if I can, about what's coming in 2 weeks, and then we can go right to gun violence and the epidemic that our city is facing. So the congressman is, he sends both of us a lot of emails. It'll be 4 or 5 in the morning, and that's kind of a regular day. These days, he's sending us emails at 1 or 2 in the morning, and I don't exaggerate when I say he's not sleeping, because he is so concerned about what the outcome will be on November 8th, this coming election. There's a lot at stake. I know we are facing remarkable challenges in this city right now. We're going to talk about the congressman's gun violence plan. But if you just look at what has been done over the last 2 years, start with the American Rescue Plan, which was the first major piece of legislation under the Biden administration. The child tax credit, which lasted for a year approximately, lowered childhood poverty by 40% in this country. Okay? If you look at the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure plan, which passed with Republican and Democratic support, over the course of the next 5 to 6 years, between SEPTA, the city of Philadelphia, our bridges, roads, our waterways, we are slated to get well over $1 billion. The school district of Philadelphia just told us this week they got a grant from that package for lead pipe removal, which is long overdue. They're applying for money to convert their bus fleet to a clean fuel fleet. So the impact and consequences of these kinds of packages that have passed under the Biden administration are very real. We just passed the Inflation Reduction Act, First time that Congress has put controls and limitations on pharmaceutical prices. If you know somebody who is on insulin starting in 2023, they won't have to pay more than $35 a month, max, as a copay. And it is the single largest investment this nation has ever made in fighting what will be the defining crisis of our time, I think, in climate change. But if we lose the House, if we lose the Senate, then all Joe Biden will be able to do in the White House is play defense. Okay? So I know this is not a ward meeting, it's a community meeting, but I wanted to just give you a sense of why the congressman is so concerned. And so that takes us to gun violence. This is a plan that the congressman put out last April. We spent 6 months researching and putting this plan together. We talked to criminologists, we talked to academics, we talked to youth program providers, we talked to workforce development experts, we talked to law enforcement. And it is a holistic approach to stopping the carnage in our streets, okay? And Felicia, I'll kind of give it to you to go through the details, but let me make one point here. The federal government doesn't really play a direct role in day-to-day law enforcement in local communities, other than through the ATF and FBI, and they have important roles to play. Last year, the congressman wrote the president and asked the ATF to stand up a gun prevention task force, a strike force, to stop the flow of guns that have been flooding our streets since mid-2020 at a rate we've never seen. So there are roles to play. But by and large, the federal government's role is to send money to states and municipalities. And if leadership at the local level, for whatever reason, and I'm not pointing fingers at any particular figure right now, but if leadership at the local level is not able to work in a coordinated fashion, it doesn't really matter how much money we send, okay? And so the advice that I want to leave you with, and then Felicia go into the details of the plan, we are about to face the most consequential, I think, election in certainly the last 20, 30 years of Philadelphia's history. Ed Rendell said it very well at a dinner this past summer. The governor has seen any number of challenges in his political career. A city on the verge of bankruptcy in the early 90s, a recession when he became governor, and he said he has never faced a crisis like what Philadelphia is facing. Okay? So when you are vetting people who are vying for office, whatever it might be, mayor, council, judge, other offices that'll be on the ballot, they need to confront this head on. They cannot dance around this issue. We have a 5-alarm fire raging in this city, and we need a response appropriate to the level of the crisis. So with that.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening. So as Anush stated, I'm Felicia Parker Cox, the Congressman's District Director. And I want to share a little bit about what the Congressman's plan is. I mean, I think Anush has outlined specifically that the details of the plan are very straightforward and are very key priorities for the Congressman. But in order for us to get this from paper into actual process and into realization is going to take a collective effort to, number one, make sure we get out the vote so that we put people in office who will support these ideas and these priorities. And then secondly, I think the theme tonight, because I was here early, was to listen to Mary Isaacson talk about from the state and Mark Squilla talk about from the city. This is an all hands on deck approach. So it's going to take a collaborative effort. I think we heard some great ideas that the state can implement and some that the city as well, but it's going to take federal dollars to also help offset and implement those, to bring those things towards implementation. So some of the ideas and the key priorities that the Congressman has in his plan cover. The first and foremost, which I think has been said, and I think Mark Squilla spoke to it, is about that collective effort and that collaboration between the DEA, the FBI, the federal government, and then our state police, and then also our local police. So one of the key things in here is in regards to how can these factions come together and work collaboratively to bring about some real actionable steps to take to address this issue. In the plan also, we cover both on the ground things such as community policing and actual first step dealing with violence. And then the second approach is the research piece. One of the key pieces that came to mind when I heard Mark Squilla speak in particular was that we had the opportunity to sit and meet with Marla Davis Bellamy of Philadelphia, formerly Philadelphia Ceasefire, I forgot the new name, at Temple's Katz School of Medicine. And one of the things she speaks about is a program that she went through at Chelsea, which was called The Hub. And she shared being in a room and they would collectively and collaboratively work together. So they brought together parole, they brought together the state police, they brought together social services and social workers and DHS and all of these different entities. And they would be provided a case. So one of the things that Mark Squilla talked about was one of the young people who was involved in something also had some priors. So when they bring forth a name, they realized how many times this one individual was touched by all of these different organizations. And because the federal government and because our city and local government work in silos too often, they miss opportunities such as what she shared. And so in the plan that you'll see, there are key programs in which the Congressman identifies, such as research and evaluation, such as working together collaboratively to try and figure out ways to tackle it. So we can infuse all the dollars that we want from the federal government into the city to try and combat it, but without actionable items, actionable steps, actionable measures to take place, then it's all for naught. So we encourage you, and those who did not, or if you want to share the plan, it's on the Congressman's website on the landing page of evans.house.gov. So you can read through it, learn more about the priorities, but we cover job and economic development. We cover the issues for small businesses. I heard what was said about South Street and what the businesses are enduring. So support for small businesses in that aspect, support for economic development. What we know is that people who get up and go to work every day generally aren't out there trying to ride four-wheelers at 3 o'clock in the morning on South Street, or generally aren't trying to carjack Uber drivers or things like that. People who have jobs to go to, who have something to look forward to get up the next day, tend to not be involved in these type of things. So the plan covers a myriad of different issues, not just saying more policing, not just saying more bodies on the street, but what does that look like holistically from the whole round issue? And then also how can these priorities be brought to life through the amount of dollars that can be invested from the federal government?
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Yeah, and a lot of this is based on, a lot of this is based on proven tools. Last year, University of Pennsylvania published a study, and they found that on a block where a basic systems home repair project was done, and that is giving somebody who's on a fixed income or low to moderate income household, they might have a boiler that broke down, they might have a roof that's leaking, windows that are broken or drafty. Something has gone wrong with the house that puts it on the verge of uninhabitability. If you spend $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is, to keep that house habitable and that person or family in the household, there's an associated 20% drop in crime on that block. Okay. I raise that as an example to say the situation is not hopeless. There are solutions out there. There's solutions that worked in the past. There's solutions that are working in the present. The city of Camden and the city of Trenton have become national models on crime prevention, believe it or not. But we have to put those tools to use. And a lot of that is what you'll find in the plan.
Before I pass it off to see if anyone has any questions, I think one of the other main themes You're good. You got to start for that. Other main themes we were talking about is how can constituents access what you're trying to do, or how does it directly affect them? So people want to know how where's the intersection of possibly some of these people in the room and this plan from the congressman.
I'll answer. So one portion of the plan is a bill that the congressman has co-led with Val Demings from Florida. It's called the Victim Act. It's relatively simple. It's $1 billion fund for police departments to hire more detectives. Okay, our clearance rate in Philadelphia is at an all-time low. We're something on the order of 21, 22% of homicides that are actually the perpetrator is found, charged, so on and so forth. We don't have the forensic or detective capacity in the police department to track these cases down. And so the solution is simply directing more resources so departments like Philly PD can hire more detectives and get that clearance rate up. I think if we start to see that there are consequences for certain actions, that changes behavior. So in my view, that's an example of how that translates to day-to-day life in our city.
And the councilman brought up that point as well.
Sure. And I would just say also the engagement piece. I think, in order for any representative, whether it's the councilman or the state rep who was here, to know what priorities are important to you, you have to be vocal. So I think oftentimes, as I heard tonight, had I not been here, I don't think I would have known keenly the effect of what was happening on South Street. I know in my head because I saw it on the news, but to live here and to experience it, and then to also maybe have a business here or to be affected by it, that information is information that your elected official can take, because it drives policies such as this. So we can sit in our office and think, well, what makes sense for our constituents, but it's better to come from you. So to that end, reach out, tell your elected officials what your needs are, where you like to see things go, and that helps them drive and create the policy that we have now that we can hopefully get moved forward towards legislation.
And it matters.
It does.
It
It
does.
does. And I know we're running down on time. I wanted to see if anyone had any questions from the audience. Anybody? And I do. You all get stars for staying till the very end. And your prizes, you can help us fold up a chair,
So
as we call it.
I do just want to say that I hope you don't have questions because we were just that fabulous, because you all had great questions so that means we covered everything tonight.
I do promise, and thank you both for making it here. I do promise we will be reaching out again, and we will be putting information. We will blast out this information, as well as the magic of Manny and editing. We'll put the contact information on the final edited piece for our website as well. So there'll be multiple places where you can find out how to get in touch with your elected officials. And again, I want to thank everybody. State Rep Mary Isaacson, State Senator Nikil Saval, Councilman, not Congressman, but Councilman Squilla, and representatives from Congressman Evans' office, Felicia and Anuj. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you next month for our elections and the topic to be announced. Thank you so much.